Star Trek Behind the Fold. Written and narrated by Riley Wright. Chapter 3. You can rest now, Erevik. I believe it was a success, Admiral Kozak said quietly. The aged Vulcan sighed, his hands shaking. It was more difficult than I surmised, he admitted. Strange. His human ancestry should have made the procedure easier. Kozak approached them. The hanging light illuminated all but his eyes. Take my advice, Doc. Don't underestimate him. That was my mistake. Erevik eyed his victim, failing to fully mask his fascination. Spock was still, his breathing shallow, in a deep sleep thanks to a well-placed nerve pinch to the shoulder. If you will give me a moment, I can further verify it worked as intended. Kozak shook his head. No. I'll question him at another time. For now, I'm satisfied. He lifted Spock's chin so that the white light washed over his pale, green-tinged face. Besides, we wouldn't want to keep the ambassador and his wife waiting. They'll grow suspicious. Erevik nodded. The hospital staff believe I am prepping for surgery. I will do so now. His life is still in jeopardy. Kozak signaled to two silent guards at the door. All right, let's pack up and let the healer do his job. He sneered at Spock. Pleasant dreams. Voices. They sounded distant, but familiar. Curiosity beckoned him closer, pulling him through the turmoil that was his mind. As the fog receded, the voices acquired faces. Sorel, thank you for stopping in, came the indisputable sound of his mother, Amanda Grayson's voice beside him. Spock could feel her hand around his, cold and clammy, but he was unable to acknowledge her, not even telepathically. Sorel, their family healer and friend, replied, I would have arrived sooner had my last patient not been delayed. Spock heard him take a seat opposite Amanda. Is he aware of what happened? Her hand tightened around his. I'm not sure. Neither spoke for several seconds. The silence was heavy. All in due time. It was a tragedy. There is no shame in how Spock will process the event. Even a Vulcan is permitted emotional release for situations such as this. Sorel indicated something. May I review his chart? He asked. Amanda smiled and nearly laughed. You don't have to ask, Sorel. There is no one I trust more with my family than you. I am honored, he replied sincerely. More accustomed than most to the emotional inflections of humans. He studied the data chart a while, brows knitting together in obvious concern. He is quite fortunate. It was a serious injury, fatal, had he not received treatment in time. Do they know the cause? No, we were hoping Spock will tell us, once he... She trailed off. The hand tight around his began to shake. It is all right, Amanda. Your son will make a full recovery. In the meantime, you should rest. She wiped her eyes, forcing her emotions back behind the practiced mask. Is it that obvious? Only to a healer. And where is Sarek? I talked him into eating something. I believe he's in the cafeteria. His transfusions saved Spock's life. Sorel felt her son's free wrist. A logical choice. As for the human elements, I volunteered, of course, but Spock needed a considerable amount of blood, more than I could give. Fortunately, they keep human plasma on hand for emergencies, Amanda explained, rather dejectedly. He released him, catching her change in tone. It displeases you that you could not help your son, but I assure you that you are doing so now by merely being present. She awarded him another smile for his efforts, though inwardly she still despaired. I will return before he is discharged to re-examine him. Aravik is an apt physician, but very busy, and albeit due for retirement. Perhaps he will allow me to take on his patient. Thank you, Sorel, professed Amanda gratefully. Sorel took one last look at Spock's vitals on the diagnostic screen above his bed, thick brows rising in momentary confusion as a new curiosity struck him. He does not appear to be in a healing trance, he observed. Amanda glanced worriedly at Spock. I received a transmission from him a year ago, explaining how he had been injured and was able to enter the trance, which greatly improved his recovery. I am troubled that he hasn't done so this time. I see. So he is at least capable. Sorel studied him thoughtfully, pleased that Spock's hybrid genetics had not handicapped his restorative abilities. There are many reasons, or rather, barriers, that can inhibit a Vulcan's ability to enter the trance. Such as? Amanda prodded in interest, straightening in her seat. He continued, dire situations in which help may not arrive. In the case of extreme blood loss or weakness, brain injury, or even psychological or physiological trauma. All of these can affect whether or not a healing trance is enacted and/or successful. Sorel gave her a reassuring thin smile. It was an expression he found had logical use in his field. Your son should recover regardless. His decision or failure to enter the trance is not surprising considering his ordeal. I would not concern yourself with it. The door opened, interrupting their conversation. Spock knew without seeing that it was his father. He was an impressive sight, usually, and Spock knew no other side of him. But to Amanda and Sorel's eyes, Sarek had changed. He was out of his formal wear and instead donned civilian robes of brown. His rigid features were less so, and his face seemed to finally realize its age. The wrinkles had deepened, and his skin was near as pale as Spock's. Sarek inclined his head in greeting to Sorel, skipping formalities. He glanced at his son instinctively and offered the same small smile he kept specifically for his wife. She returned the expression. Feeling better? She asked, his answer already made clear through the telepathic bond they shared. The hospital's plomik soup does not compare to yours, my wife, he complimented. Her smile broadened appreciatively. I should hope not. He addressed Sorel. I see that you heard about our son. You have honored my family for many years, and I am grateful. If Sorel was taken aback by Sarek's uncharacteristic display of emotion, he concealed it well. The honor is mine. I was telling Amanda that I will return once he is due to be discharged. It may be arranged for him to be my patient, given our history together. Sarek nodded in agreement. A logical decision. With that, goodbyes were expressed, and Sorel departed. Spock slowly drifted back to sleep, comforted by his parents' presence and docile tones. It was as if he were a child again, awakening from some terrible dream, to find that all was well and he was not alone. He allowed the fantasy, not yet willing to accept the truth. The Enterprise. Gone. The sun was shining upon spring flowers in bloom. Their sweet fragrance carried upon the gentle breeze and ruffled the exposed hair on Kevin Riley's head. He hardly cared. The sun's brilliance only made his headache worse. The flowers aggravated his long-since dormant allergies, and the wind caused his skin to itch savagely between bandages. The truth was that Earth hadn't been his home in a long time, so long that it felt just as alien to him as Vulcan, with its blistering heat and bone-crushing gravity. Fortunately, he had not stayed there long, as Starfleet seemed determined to be rid of him. He leaned back into the hard wooden rocking chair on his grandparents' porch, vaguely wondering why they never once felt the urge to go off-world, or at least leave Ireland. He smirked darkly. I'm half tempted to do the same now. To suffer such a loss so early in his career was devastating. His friends' faces were practically glued to the backside of his eyelids every time he tried to rest. Ironically, that was all anyone would tell him to do. Rest, Mr. Riley, take it easy, get some sleep, in time you'll move on, etc., etc. He sighed, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. Move on to what exactly? Another ship? Another crew? Serving aboard the Enterprise was a dream come true. It was the only vessel he longed to serve on, that anyone wanted to serve on. There was another feeling he couldn't quite shake by their words, and that was an urgency to make him move on. From the moment he was able to stand, Starfleet had sent him on his way, before he could even speak with his commander about what had happened, or at least say goodbye. He personally had never said more than a yes, sir, to Mr. Spock. He was untouchable, unbending, and impersonal. Uhura often challenged the shared fear and intimidation the new crew members felt toward the Vulcan. Oh, he's no different than you or me, she would say, bringing truth to her words through action, as it was not uncommon to see the two of them entertaining the crew with their music. Spock's lyre and Uhura's melodic voice combined to create a beautiful and stirring sound. At times, she would even throw her arm around him, laying to rest every misunderstanding and judgment. Kevin smiled sadly. It is you, Naoda, I'll miss most. The sound of a swinging screen door disrupted his reminiscing. He glanced up at his grandfather, an old man with a long white beard and wrinkly, squinting eyes. He took the rocking chair beside him, grunting as he settled in. Beautiful morning, eh, Riley? He asked, his voice gruff but friendly, with the hint of an accent. Kevin nodded silently. Your grandma has bacon on. You should join us for breakfast. I haven't seen ya eat a thing since ya beamed on to me doormat. He chuckled. Scared me half to death when you did. I'm sorry, Grandpa, Kevin said. I wasn't given much of a choice, he added bitterly. His grandfather frowned, wiry eyebrows lifting inquiringly. Not very happy with them, are ya? Anything I should know about? No, I'm just confused is all, Kevin explained. Everything happened so fast, and I have this strange feeling. He rubbed his head. Why does it hurt so much to think? His grandfather withdrew a bottle of painkillers from his pocket without question and tossed it to him. Kevin accepted it in thanks, plopping a few in his mouth and downing them dry. You were saying, lad, his grandfather prodded, repocketing the pills he kept on hand for arthritis flare-ups. I have a strange feeling that something just isn't right, you know? Mm-hmm. So, what are you gonna do about it then? It was Kevin's turn to inquire. Do about it? That's right. It looks to me like you have two options. You can either walk away from this and put it all behind you, or not. So you're saying I should look into this? Kevin pressed, hopefully. His grandfather humphed. I ain't saying anything. With that he stood, stretching loudly and breathing in the savory aroma of bacon wafting through the kitchen window. He faced Kevin, his eyes suddenly sad and worn. "Actually, I will say this, me boy. What you're feeling isn't all that different from how I felt when your father joined that colony on Tarsus. But I chose to ignore it. I walked away from it and put it behind me." There was a heavy pause. He placed a rough hand on Kevin's shoulder. A tear slid down his face into his snowy beard. "And when he and your mother were killed by that TOS," he spat, "I decided to never ignore such feelings again." Kevin embraced him, fighting back an equal swell of emotion. "I understand," was all he managed to say. "Maybe, once I figure this out, I will stay here a while." He followed his grandfather inside. His grandmother smiled warmly at him as she piled bacon onto his plate. "They aren't getting any younger." A considerable amount of time had passed. Spock realized this the moment he came to. His body was stiff and weak, mouth parched and dry, and his head ached deeply, as if it had suffered a considerable blow. He opened his eyes, blinking away the blurriness, the disorientation that surrounded his consciousness like fog. What happened to me? He wondered, perplexed and alarmed by his state of mind. "Spock?" Sarek noticed him stirring from the window and approached with barely concealed relief, as if he had been foregoing his daily meditations. Spock looked up at him, trying to mask his own reaction at the sight of his father's concern. The expression seemed out of place upon his usually stern face. To Spock's further surprise, Sarek reached out and touched his arm for a moment. Spock's alarm radiated through the touch, for Sarek quickly withdrew it. "It is good to see you awake," he admitted, taking the chair beside him. "You were unconscious for several days. Your mother is home resting now." He shook his head in vexation. "She is a stubborn woman." Spock tried to sit up, but Sarek gently stopped him. "That would be unwise. I will notify the healer that you are conscious." "Not yet," Spock said, his voice hoarse. He coughed quietly, but the action still hurt. Without hesitation, Sarek filled a cup of water at the serving station and handed it to him, lifting his head. Spock drank thirstily. The cool liquid coursing through his system reminded him of something he couldn't quite place. He shuddered involuntarily at the thought. Sarek noticed this, but withheld comment. Instead, his eyes flashed towards Spock's diagnostic panel briefly. "Spock, do you remember what happened?" he asked, regaining control. He looked away, not wanting his father to read the sadness in his eyes. "Yes, only I do not know how." Sarek sighed. Starfleet believes the Enterprise suffered a warp core malfunction. No doubt Captain Kirk ordered a ship-wide evacuation, despite the odds of anyone surviving the blast. He gestured to Spock's heavily bandaged chest. "Your injury is the result of a lesser explosion. Perhaps system failures throughout the ship caused overloaded circuits to erupt." Spock raised an eyebrow in question. "That is what I recall, although I am admittedly confused as to how such a malfunction could occur with Mr. Scott on board." Chief Engineer Scott was the best in the fleet, and never lax in his duty to his lass, the Enterprise. He continued, eyes still averted. "And why I would abandon my post, unless Dr. McCoy." The image of McCoy giving him a hypospray and placing him in the pod came flooding back. The memory stood out strangely from the rest. Spock tried to understand, but his head only ached sharply in reply. He closed his eyes, pain subsiding in the darkness. I must return to where I was found. At the very least, it is my duty to determine what transpired. Surely Starfleet is already mounting a thorough investigation, one that you are not fit to join at present. Spock went to protest, but Sarek raised a hand, silencing him. That does not mean we cannot investigate the matter ourselves. My only request is that you recover first. He glanced off toward the window, in which their hot sun was dipping below the desert horizon, casting the pale city skyscrapers in red. I too must know. It is my duty, as your father. Spock again looked at him. His father's face was gentle and mournful. This moment, he will not judge. Spock gave in to his sorrow, hands balling into fists at his sides and eyes red with tears. I mourn with thee, Spock.